Hi, this is Donna. Welcome to DD Papercraft. In today's video, we're going to be making this beer mug style project, and I think this would run really nicely in conjunction with the beer bottle, which I made a few months ago, and I'll put a link for that here. As you can see, I've made this out of acetate, but I am going to demonstrate making it in cardstock just because it'll be easy for you to see. The overall size of this piece is it's 3.5 to 4.25 inches on the top, and it's 6 inches high. But you'll see as we put the piece together, it wouldn't be too difficult for you to resize it. We will make our own hexagon for the base. If you have hexagon dies, you'll need one which has 2-inch sides. So without further ado, let's put the project together. For the outer sections of the mug, for the acetate, I cut 2 pieces which were 6.25 by 6.5, and that is because where these seams join, I wanted that to be as thin as possible but still something I can work with. So the acetate was 6.25 by 6.5. For the cardstock, if you're going to decorate on the outside, you could use 2 pieces which were 6.5 by 6.5. Along one of the 6.5 sides, score at 2, 4 and 6, and then rotate 90 degrees and score at 6. So this is giving us 3 of our panels, our glue tab, and these are our base glue tabs. So you'll do that on 2 pieces. Fold and burnish along all of the score lines. Next, take your scissors. You'll treat each piece the same, and you will also treat the acetate exactly the same. So if you have your piece in this orientation, we're going to remove this bottom left-hand corner. Take a wedge from the end of this glue tab, and then we're going to cut up each of the 1/2 inch score lines like so, and then take a wedge from the ends of these. And just make sure that you take your wedge so that on this piece is particularly if you're using acetate, you don't want the tabs to be interfering or overlapping one another as your piece comes round to form its hexagonal shape. So do make sure that you cut quite an angle from the ends of the tabs. That's our 6 sides, and now we're going to join the piece together along the side glue tab. If you're using acetate, I would recommend you use something like a red liner tape. Make sure that you burnish that down thoroughly before you peel the backing off. You want to concentrate on getting the score line along the base section lined up as you add the 2 pieces together, because you can always trim around and neaten up the top if you need to. So we'll add these 2 pieces into here like so. If you're making yours from cardstock, you can now fold over the end section, add glue to this long glue tab, and then join the 2 sides together like so. Now, if you're making yours from acetate, I had actually constructed the cup and then had to slot the pattern paper down on the inside, which did prove slightly tricky. And you can see I've added some red liner tape to the bottom of the pattern paper on the inside, and the top element is not attached at all. If I were to make one of these again, I would join my 2 pieces together as I've done here. If you imagine this was acetate, I would then add my pattern paper on, maybe with 1 line of red liner tape at the bottom, maybe some red liner tape along the seam, and I would do that before I bring the sides together. You obviously can, as I've done, make up the outside mug and then slot these pieces on the inside, but I do think adding the pattern paper whilst the piece is flat would have been a lot easier, but obviously it depends how you're going to decorate your piece. So I'm going to join up the 2 sides. So that is effectively the sides of our beer mug. So let's fold in the base glue tabs, and now we want to make the base. Now I'm going to go through making a hexagon the right size. As I say, if you have hexagon dies, you want one that's got sides of 2 inches. You could, as I've done in previous projects, add a circle onto the bottom. If it was a slightly oversized circle, add that onto the bottom and then go around and trim around the edges. You could add on a square of cardstock and then trim around the edges once it was glued on. So you do have various options, but we're going to make a hexagon to stick on the bottom. So for the base, you can make the base out of acetate as I've done. You might want to make a template which you can keep, put to one side, keep that for later use, or go straight into your base cardstock. But you'll need a piece which is 3.5 inches times 4 inches. If you're going straight into your base cardstock, you want to draw lightly with a pencil. I'm going to do mine in black marker just so you can see. And you want to line your ruler up with the 1 3/4 inch track on the scoreboard and draw a line vertically. So you're just splitting this piece of cardstock in half along the 3.5 inch side. Rotate the piece so your pencil line will now be running horizontally across the middle, and draw down from top to bottom the cardstock at 1 inches and 3 inches. So we've split our piece into 6 sections, and you'll note that the section here between 1 and 3 in the top section and the section here between 1 and 3 is already the 2 inch side that we need. So remove your piece from the scoreboard, and we're now going to join from the top line mark here down to the mark on the right hand side. So line your ruler up with the very top, bring your ruler around like so, and you should find that your line that you draw in is 2 inches. It might be a smidge over or a smidge under, but it is near as we're going to get it without getting into very precise, complicated measurements or using a hexagon die. So if it's slightly over, we can trim it around afterwards if we need to. But I'm just going to bring my ruler around, and these 2 lines are 2 inches, and we're going to do that all the way round. So we're now going to cut around the edges. You could go in with your craft knife and ruler, use your trimmer, use your scissors, whatever you're most comfortable with. Do try to cut along the line as accurately as you can, because you've taken the time to get the measurements as accurately as you can. So if this is your template, you'll now then draw around this on your base cardstock. If this is your base cardstock, you want to get rid of any pencil lines. Bring in the outer shell of your beer mug, and I'm going to add construction glue onto each of the glue tabs. This is just going to, obviously it will add the strength to the base, but it will also mean it gives me the wiggle room to put my hexagon into shape. So I'm just going to work my way around, lining up the sides and pulling the outer shell into shape as I work my way around. So you can see that fits on there quite well. Once I'm happy with that, I can tip that up and burnish down the tabs in the base. So once this is fully dried, I can then just go in and trim off any bits which are sticking out with my scissors. So you want to leave that to dry. If you're making the cardstock version and you're going to be decorating or adding pattern paper onto the outside, you might want to add that on now before we make the handle, or at least before you add the handle into place. So the next thing we're going to do is make the handle, and I made a template, so I'm just going to go through the measurements of that, and of course you can change this up as you so wish. So my starting scrap cardstock was 2.5 by 4 inches, and I've scored a border of 1/2 inch on all 4 sides. This 1/2 inch section to the right is going to be the tab here, this tab here, which is where we're going to join the 2 handle pieces together. So the first thing we want to do is draw our outer shape, and obviously you will all have different ideas as to what you want yours to look like. So for instance, I might bring around the curve like so, and I might do the same at the bottom, bring around the curve like so, and then have this as fairly straight. And then I want to do a 1/2 inch section in the middle. So I will come along this bottom score line, do the same here, and then I will bring my curve in like so. And then you will have a tab which runs across like so. This is 2 inches, and on the actual one that I made, I did 1 3/4 inches. So make the tab as long as you want. Obviously you can make the handle in acetate or cardstock. The next thing I want to do is cut this out to create my template. We now want to transfer this template onto our actual cardstock or whatever it is that we're going to use for the handle, acetate maybe. And this piece is 4.5 times 4 inches. Along the 4.5 inch side, we're going to score at 1/2 inch, 2 inches, 2.5 inches, and 4 inches. Bring your template in. So I'm going to line my template up with the left-hand side of my base cardstock, and I'm going to draw around my template. I'll do it in pen so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm just going to come around like so, draw in the middle, draw straight across for my tab, and then draw this outside. So that equals 1/2 of my handle. I'm then going to turn this piece over, line up the tab in the middle, line up the right hand side like so, and then I'm going to do exactly the same. So that is the shape of my handle. So we want to cut that out, and then we're going to fold along the 2 central tabs like so. So our handle's going to come together like so. Now you have some options in terms of sticking the handle on. Obviously I could stick my handle on any time because I've chosen to put my paper on the inside. If you're using hard cardstock, obviously you need to make sure that you've added your pattern paper. So you want to think about the placement of your handle. Now you can either, as I've done on this one, fold in the 2 score lines, so the left hand side of our D as it looks like, and then you will add glue onto this piece and add those 2 together like so, and then you can add glue and you can add it on to the side of your beer glass like so. So that assumes that you're going to have your handle on one of these straight sides, as it were. Now what you could do if you preferred is fold the tabs out the other way so that your piece is sitting like so, and you could then add your handle on so that your handle sits either side of one of the angles here. So you might prefer your handle to be like so, sitting over an angle so that you get that look, rather than having on the side of the glass and getting that type of look. So just think about how you want your piece to look. So for the sake of just completion, I will just quickly add this onto here. So they would sit, I've got glue everywhere, on there like so. And that would effectively be your mug finished. So a relatively quick and easy project to make and come together, but it's a really effective box, I think. So here is the one which I made earlier out of acetate. So with the acetate, as I mentioned at the beginning, I cut the glue tabs down to 1/4 inch rather than 1/2 inch. I have added an acetate bottom, which I created in exactly the same way. The handle I've created in the same way, and the only thing I would do differently is I would add the pattern paper to the inside of the acetate before I add the acetate together. just because I think that would be easier. And as I said at the beginning, it would not be too tricky to resize this by extending the width of each of the panels and indeed the height of the piece overall. So there we have the project for today. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel. And until next time, thanks for watching.